I just want to say that technically, I'm a Morrowind boomer.
Okay, Enwa, let's get you to bed.
My first taste of the Elder Scrolls was in 2003. I locked myself in my room while college was on winter break. But I don't think Morrowind did everything better than every other Elder Scrolls game out there. Don't get me wrong, I do think it did some things the best in the series. And of course, that's what this video is about. Since the time in college I played Morrowind, I sacrificing hundreds of hours over a month completing everything I could, then modding the heck out of it, I was genuinely excited by Oblivion's release. I bought it at release and played through it. Didn't get a chance to mod it since I played it on the Xbox 360, then I put it down, and honestly, it was a little bit of a letdown for me. The alien world full of casual fantasy racism was replaced by a generic Western fantasy, probably because Todd Howard had seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy and thought it would resonate more with audiences. But I found it kinda boring. The characters both looked and acted goofy, but looking back I can see it had value. It was really leaning into the zany parts of the Elder Scrolls lore. I didn't hate it at the time, I enjoyed the game, but I've always preferred Skyrim and Morrowind over Oblivion. Both are extremes. Oblivion is like the weird middle child. Skyrim has the simplicity and wonder of a young child, though now he's in his teen years, while Morrowind has the complexity and difficulty of the eldest child. And Daggerfall? It's even more complex and obtuse, but not as weird. Still a little weird though. More like an older sibling that's already moved out and not as many friends of the family or neighbors know much about. Damn, I'm good at metaphors. So after Morrowind and Oblivion, I was wary about Skyrim. I thought, like most Morrowind boomers, that the slow decline from Morrowind to Oblivion and now Skyrim would continue. Of course, at the time, I assumed there would be a TES 6, and this was before Skyrim's runaway popularity. So I bought Skyrim maybe a year after it came out in 2012, maybe early 2013. This was actually, I think, when I started to not pre-order games or buy them at release. I bought Skyrim with the DLCs, and for PC this time. And as you might be able to tell, I enjoy the game thoroughly, despite the signature Bethesda bugs. I came back to the game in 2021 because at the time I was playing Dragon's Dogma, also discovering it pretty late. And every time I did a Google search for a mod, Google would be like, Skyrim has a mod for that. So I was like, fuck it. I got Special Edition, and the rest is history. At some point I heard about Daggerfall Unity, and you know what? I tried it. I found there was a lot I liked about Daggerfall. It had even more of the Morrowind jank, without yet leaning into this specific type of Kirkbride weirdness, so I expanded my perspective yet again about specific features that have risen and fallen in the series. I feel like I could view the Elder Scrolls series like a set of line graphs. Some things got better, some things got worse in each game, some changed. Every game streamlines the Scrolls formula, but some good things get removed in every game too. There are advantages and disadvantages to each mutation of the formula. So, here I am, enjoyer of 4 of the mainline Elder Scrolls games, and I'm going to talk about, at least in my opinion, who did it best. And Arena is not really included in this ranking. It will be discussed for context. But in my opinion, Daggerfall does everything Arena does, but better. And I haven't played it to a degree that I feel I could represent it faithfully, so it gets the honorary GOAT status for introducing the Elder Scrolls to the world, for being a fantasy kitchen sink in the early ages of computer RPGs. Shout out to OpenTES Arena being developed, much like OpenMW and Daggerfall Unity, it seeks to remaster Arena. When it's done, mark my words, I will definitely play it. Especially if its modding community is also as big as Daggerfall Unity. They got freaking airships, man. The categories are combat, adventure split up into large and small scale, stats, story and lore, questlines, crafting, magic, gameplay, user friendliness, city design, atmosphere, and dungeon/level design. And some of the answers to these might be obvious to everyone. Some of them might be my insane takes on things. So without further ado, let's go.
Here we go!
Combat. A lot of you might disagree, but Skyrim. Thanks for watching. I'm just kidding. Let me elaborate. I'm not pulling any punches here. Skyrim 100% has the best combat, though without mods, none of the Elder Scrolls games have particularly compelling combat. which is weird for a game series that has so much of it. Like, if I did a true tier list of combat for most games, including The Elder Scrolls, the entire series would get a C to a B. I do want to say, for some reason, there are so many diehards that love The Elder Scrolls combat, and it's not just like first person versus third person, and me saying first person is something that I don't particularly like, because it can be good. Like, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 did a really good job with first person combat. Ardenfall, which is an indie game that's kind of Morrowind based, did a really good job with first person combat. Okay, but The Elder Scrolls combat in and of itself, there's something I need to talk about. There's a definite split in what I would call methodology of the combat between Morrowind and Oblivion. That is, before this split, combat was largely meant to mimic tabletop RPGs. Every time you swung your weapon, dice were rolled that determined if your character hit or not. That subtle difference means that combat was meant as a measure of your character's combat skills and stats, not a measure of your skill at the game. This is an important distinction. On one end of this spectrum of character versus player skill is the turn-based RPGs, the strategy RPGs. Stuff like Final Fantasy Tactics, Baldur's Gate 3, most JRPGs with turn-based combat. And Arena and Daggerfall fall just to the right of these. On the other end is action RPGs, action games, slashers, FPSs, etc. The entire Elder Scrolls series hits in the middle, with Arena and Daggerfall and Morrowind on the left side of this line, sliding slightly to the right side of this distinction in Oblivion and Skyrim. The fact that the Elder Scrolls series slides across this scale as the series goes forward means it never truly embraces either end of the spectrum, and it's worse for it. Probably the worst middle ground example is Oblivion's combat. Melee, at least. You do get a lot of the trappings of action RPGs that you didn't have in Morrowind or earlier games. The ability to actively block with your shield, for example. The ability to dodge, though I had no idea you could do this until Oblivion Remastered, since it's gated behind having nearly mastered acrobatics. But still, your attacks aren't impactful. Enemies don't react. There's no weight to them. Compare this with the 2001 title Gothic, which was purely an action RPG from a few years before, and you see combat is weighty. Enemies react. Oblivion is mostly a hit enemy until they fall down, watch their HP gauge to even tell if you're hitting kind of game. Oblivion Remastered really overhauled this, so I would say Oblivion's combat is okay, with that one simple change. They slid more towards action RPG in Skyrim, with at least some reactions from enemies, blocking, the ability to dual wield finally, after all these years. Still, it pales in comparison to most action RPGs. I do want to slide back the other direction and mention here that Morrowind is just as bad as Oblivion, but in slightly different ways. Enemies were damage sponges, and the way the stats worked, you could swing right through enemies for several minutes and never hit them while they were hitting you. Actually kind of feels like an MMORPG. Your swings are so fast and unweighty they're comical. You cannot actively block or avoid attacks, and as with most Elder Scrolls games, it's very hard to passively outrange your enemy's attacks because hitboxes are frontal cones and hurtboxes are just large blobs. Strangely, though the dice rolls and inability to actively block and dodge in Daggerfall still exists, all attacks both you and your enemy make are slow and telegraphed. Things are deadlier, so combat isn't a long slog. You can pretty effectively see where your enemies are attacking also, and effectively outrange them while doing an elaborate dance in and out of range while you make your attacks. If you just took the dice rolls away, it would be a great combat system, and it already is kind of almost great. So I don't think this was intentional, but Daggerfall's combat actually feels much better than Morrowind or Oblivion, in my opinion. I guess that means I'm an honorary, what do you call a Daggerfall guy? A Dagger fossil. This is why I'm on the combat. If you're glazing the Elder Scrolls combat, you're wrong. You're wrong. So remove the dice rolls from Daggerfall and it's pretty good. Oh, and get rid of click and drag attacking, which Daggerfall Unity has an option for. Honestly, I don't know what they were thinking. Oblivion Remastered, which already includes recoil, mod and hit stop, one button dodge with iframes, and a time block, and we have a decent action RPG. For Skyrim, add in precise hitboxes, recoil, and something like MCO for attack commitment, and it's a truly great action RPG. I so far have not found the exact combination of sauce to make Morrowind's combat feel really good. Let me know down in the comments if somebody else here has. This was a hard category. I would say large scale is travel and scale, and small scale is exploration. It's especially hard knowing that the Elder Scrolls games have the same bones but are wildly different in scale and focus. I decided to kind of have two categories in one. Scale is more about how big the world is, how well the game uses that bigness, and how we get around in it. This category is where we get a sliding scale of handcrafted versus procedural. On the procedural end, we have Daggerfall and Arena. Yes, I said I wouldn't grade it, but you need the background for Daggerfall. Arena included the entire continent of Tamriel. You know, the arena, even though they never used that name again. But it was very shallow in how much it actually showed. You got cities and dungeons, and the stuff between was procedurally generated on the fly. Of course, being a product of its time, it turned out to just be the same assets mixed up in different ways over and over again. You could go on foot, but you would never reach your destination because it's just like actually walking across the continental US. And this was Bethesda's first of 3 tries at nigh infinite procedural generation. And seeing how badly Starfield did, people just don't want that.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
Daggerfall did the same thing, but they reduced their scope to one province. They handcrafted some things and generated everything beforehand and did some amount of touch-up. Arena is generally regarded to be technically near infinite, but it's mostly empty space, repetitive, and unengaging. Daggerfall was, as in most things, a better, more focused, better executed version of Arena. So while Daggerfall and Arena would win in scale, it's more of a false scale. It's like saying I wrote a longer novel than War and Peace when I wrote the first chapter and photocopied it 1,000 times. On the other end, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim are all 100% handcrafted. You might ask if I'm going to rate these based on the size of the things they've handcrafted, and no, that doesn't really work. Morrowind is the smallest TES game at 9 square miles, with Oblivion being the biggest of these 3 at around 22 square miles, beating out Skyrim at 14 square miles. In that space, you have to judge them based on the quality of the things they offer. I would say right off, some people might say the procedurally generated nature automatically disqualifies TES 1 and 2 from winning in this category. But not so fast. It's more like comparing this metric of these games is really like comparing apples and oranges. Like, Arena and Daggerfall are kings of bigness. Arena is out because it's worse, but Daggerfall seems like it works its mechanics around its scale. I know I'm being round about this, but go with me. You can't judge all these by if they have fast travel and how easy it is because it depends on the game. Arena and Daggerfall are so big, they need fast travel. Otherwise, they'd be completely unplayable. And honestly, maybe this hurts them. You get to effectively bypass the middle part. In fact, you have to. There's a reason most people restart Skyrim 1,000 times. Before you have fast travel, just walking around the world seeing things is really fun. Arena and Daggerfall effectively cut those things out of the equation by being so goddamn big and forcing you to use fast travel. Of course, you can use mods to fix that, but that's besides the point. But therein lies the biggest thing to glean from this discussion. Daggerfall isn't about exploration at all. It's about simulation and RPG mechanics. So Daggerfall gives you the tools it wants you to experience it. It gives you fast travel to any city or dungeon right out of the gate, because if it didn't, it'd be unplayable. It definitely wins in scale, since even if Arena was being evaluated here, the scale is much more false than Daggerfall. You can actually walk from one place to another in Daggerfall, but not in Arena. There's actually a mod that lets you travel at hyperspeed in Daggerfall Unity, and you can still watch what's going on. It's called Travel Options. And your fast travel is stopped when you run into an encounter, effectively solving this entire problem. So that leaves the more modern 3. Morrowind has almost no fast travel except for the Silt Striders, a complete 180 from Daggerfall. You pretty much have to experience all the points between, but the world is a size in which that's very manageable. Oblivion grants you fast travel between cities right off the bat, makes skipping over the in-between areas much easier, which in my opinion, this denigrates the experience. At least forcing you to slow travel during early levels forces you to experience the world. Forces you to discover the encounters the programmers put there. By contrast, Skyrim doesn't let you fast travel until you've been to a place, but they have carriages that go between all major cities. I feel like they found a good middle ground between no fast travel in Morrowind, and out-of-the-box fast travel in Oblivion. I don't know if it's because of this easy fast travel or because there's actually less to do in those in-between areas in Oblivion, but it certainly feels like it. The game got boring faster, and it's the only TES game that I didn't go back to later and just explore. I never felt the need to pick a direction and just walk and see what I find, like I did with Skyrim and Morrowind. I feel like Oblivion is falling to the middle child syndrome here. I don't know if this is scientific, but Morrowind feels like it has more to discover and more to do because it forces you to do those things. I do hate how there are no horses and you start out being extremely slow, so that's a negative against it. And Skyrim feels more vertical, with a more densely packed world and lots to do, and it's bigger. As far as small-scale adventure, Morrowind and Skyrim are pretty tied, with Skyrim slightly ahead. Large-scale, Daggerfall wins. Stats. This section includes skills, perks, attributes, and basically anything else you could call an RPG element. You know, progression. You doing thing and your character getting better at it. Now here's the big question. Is having more stats better? The big sliding scale here is simulationist versus accessibility. Yes, this is a video of sliding scales apparently. As you add more and more rules, aka stats, the old tabletop games call it crunch, a game will become less and less accessible to a new player. But some amount of crunch is really needed for a game of this type to be enjoyable. Now, Dungeons & Dragons falls victim to this a lot. A little bit of history here, the D&D rules. This is kind of a gross oversimplification, but original D&D, 1st edition, 2nd edition, AD&D, was essentially the same rule set. There were some attempts to streamline the rules, but they kept piling on more and more rules to do more things, more tables, more simulation. At a certain point, a new person is like, I want to just throw a punch, how do I do that? And the DM is referencing 4 tables, grappling rules, weapon speed, weapon location, damage tables, star charts to see if Mercury is in retrograde. Now, computer games have a huge advantage over this kind of crunch, as in the computer is the one that is figuring out all these things for you. The biggest place this rules bloat can make a game outright incomprehensible is in how well your character's build works and how easy it is to walk back mistakes in your build. In most games, there's most certainly a good way to play and a bad way to play. This goes beyond doing what is meta, like for example, Stealth Archer is the meta for Skyrim. Arguably the safest choice for easy baby mode in vanilla Skyrim, but not always the most fun. This can be divided between specifics in a game, like, hey, I specialize in axes. Axes are a good weapon, but in this particular game, there are actually 4 axes, and none of them are good. I specialize in stealth and heavy armor, but they're incompatible to use together. Or the even more egregious personal failing of, I accidentally specialized in smithing because I got distracted by making armor in town, and now I'm level 50, and I couldn't kill a rat. Accessibility means not only making it obvious what is a viable build choice, or making all choices viable, which is very nearly unheard of for even the best games, but allowing you to some degree to make those mistakes and come back from them. Now, where does each Elder Scrolls fall on this scale? As a side note, Arena doesn't really have this build variety. You pick one of about 10 classes and you just have to go with it. There's no custom class. Daggerfall is easily the most complex, most crunchy game in character creation. It's got every skill that occurred in later games. It's got 3 kinds of magic that arguably do the same thing: thaumaturgy, mysticism, and alteration. It's got language skills, which lets you fast talk one specific type of creature. It's even got advantages and disadvantages, which is a GURPS level of customization that I haven't seen anywhere else, besides maybe Traveler, where you can die in character creation. GURPS and Traveler are tabletop games. Oh, and Caves of Cut, as far as video games go. In Daggerfall, you want to make your character weak to sunlight, runs fast at nighttime, regenerates HP while immersed in water? Why the hell not? If you're looking for simulation and role-playing whack-ass characters, look no further. Daggerfall's got you. At the same time, this can make a lot of people bounce off of it. It's very easy to make a completely broken character or a completely unplayable character. Needless to say, as the series went on, it sequentially trimmed down the skill list and character creation complexity with every time. To its benefit or detriment, Skyrim is on the far end of this spectrum. A lot of Morrowind boomers see it as dumbed down for sky babies, but I see it as streamlining. I want to publicly say I vastly prefer Skyrim's leveling system, perks, and level scaling over any other TES game. And the reason why may surprise you. As a self-confessed Morrowind boomer, Daggerfall enjoyer, and Oblivion meh-er, I think Skyrim once again did it best. Morrowind stripped a lot of the detritus of Daggerfall and was crunchy as heck, but reasonable. Oblivion stripped it down just a bit more, removing spears, medium armor, and a lot of spells. And then Skyrim removed half of the skills and a lot of abilities. And I do need to address the elephant in the room, and the most grievous sin to a lot of you. Skyrim removes stats. This is what I would call the biggest departure the TES games took away from simulating a tabletop RPG. I want to argue this is actually a good thing. In D&D, if you want to climb a wall, force open a door, you do a check using strength. There are a number of skills in later versions of D&D that define things that you can do, like stealth. But if there's something that's not defined, you can always fall back on the stats. In Skyrim, and in all TES games, these are similar to your individual skills. But if you want to check something that's not clearly defined by skills in D&D, say I want to use a magic item that has a personality, but you have to enforce your will on it to control it, it could be an Arcana check, but that's based on intelligence. You'd think it would be a Charisma check, right? Is it a Persuasion check? Is it a Charisma-based Arcana check? You have leeway in how you rule this as a Dungeon Master. This is an excellent plug for why stats are a great mechanic for tabletop games. Players have the freedom to try anything they could possibly imagine, including something in real life or something they just thought up. And no DM could plan for everything a player could possibly think of. This goes doubly for game developers. Video games have a predefined set of things that you can do and play. That's just the nature of the game. Even if that list of things is incredibly wide, the ambiguity from tabletop isn't really present in video games. As a designer, if there's something you want your players to be able to do, you program in a skill to check to see how good your players are at that. Therefore, I want to say the stats in the Elder Scrolls 1 through 4 are largely superfluous. Don't get me wrong, it's great for simulation purposes. If I want to know how strong my orc is, I can look at his strength and know. In Skyrim, I can interpolate based on his health and two-handed skill or whatever. The thing is, adding extra attributes, if you clearly define what these attributes do and what they mean, you run into a few problems. Attributes lock you into a playstyle. In Old Oblivion or Morrowind, you can never recover from early decisions. Arguably, this is less a problem in Daggerfall, where your attributes aren't a limiter to your skills. If you started with an absolute shit strength, you'll probably never be good at two-handed weapons, and you have to restart your game. In Skyrim, if you have a low two-handed, all you have to do is practice and struggle for a few levels. This is less realistic, I guess, but IRL, you don't have character levels, and you can have a midlife crisis and start putting on muscle in your 40s. There's not like a sliding scale of more experience needed for each level. Also, attributes lock you out of weird playstyles. I tend to pair a ranged and melee combat style with every character, mixing and matching. Take Runa for example. In Oblivion, bows scaled off agility, two-handed weapons scaled off strength. She'd be at a severe disadvantage. That's not even really that weird though. In real life, being physically strong is a large contributor to being able to fire a bow accurately. Heavy strength pulls exist. Source, I own a bow. I know it takes a lot of muscular endurance to fire accurately, and many times in a row. I feel like Skyrim is the best crystallization of the practice a skill to get better at it system in the Elder Scrolls games, that I also just learned didn't exist in Arena. It was the classic kill monsters and get XP to level up. Attributes are just a holdover middleman from early TES games' D&D influence that are completely superfluous. And there's one more thing I need to talk about. Perks. I feel like Skyrim was a masterclass in customization in this way. It stripped away unnecessary detritus from earlier games and added a perk system that let you customize your chosen playstyle further, get additional powers. And it gave you the ability to dump an entire skill tree and all the perks in it once you outgrow a playstyle with a legendary ability. The perks themselves kinda suck though. Get a perk overhaul. God, I love mods. I don't know where else to put this because I didn't cover it elsewhere. The level scaling is also the best in Skyrim. It basically has level ranges for what you encounter in dungeons. If you hit the top end of the range, congrats, you're trouncing everything, which you want sometimes. Morrowind had no scaling, which is fun if you know where to avoid and lends to the realism, but it is annoying getting destroyed in an area right next to the starting area. Oblivion's level scaling is the worst, since everything scales infinitely, so if you choose the wrong stats when you level up, it actually paradoxically gets harder to survive as you level, and Arena and Daggerfall are more similar in scaling to Skyrim than the others. So really, if I had my way, I would start with the base Skyrim, including the streamlined skills, but with better perks like Ordinator, and adding back optionally the crunch from advantages and disadvantages from Daggerfall, maybe having perks that simulated the language skills from Daggerfall 2, since the speech perk tree kind of sucks anyway. And really, perk overhauls only make it slightly better, or just add a bunch of shout focus, which is not what I want. Roll all the effects from mysticism and thaumaturgy properly into alteration. You know, all the effects that were lost, which can also be done with mods. I have a video that talks about that a lot. Don't you worry, I'm going to talk about how Skyrim stripped away way too many of the spells and powers from earlier games.
Look how they massacred my boy.
But yeah, Skyrim wins for usability and approachability, Daggerfall for the ridiculous levels of crunch and simulation. Now I know Skyrim is winning a lot so far, but just wait. The story and the lore. Dang, this is a hard one. No, it's not. Morrowind.
It is even funnier the second time.
Once again, let's back up. In this, I guess I am a Morrow boomer. The marriage of desert, raider, Tatooine, alien, bug, Nausicaa, and mushroom alien land haunted by the scars of its past, what with the living gods possibly murdering Nerevar, one of which is allowing a giant meteor to hover over his city just because he can, with a little bit of political intrigue with the houses of Morrowind, and a lot of random side quests to do, and the fact that you might not be the chosen one. Recipe for a masterpiece. Like, there have been many proposed Nerevarines in the past, and people see you as another one for the pile. You've got this volatile hotbed with 3 gods that is under the thumb of the Empire. They're a vassal state, but they're basically given free reign to govern however they want. And this game is where a lot of the Elder Scrolls lore comes from. Like the disappearance of the Dwemer, the Towers, the Numidium, Kim, the Walking Ways, the Sermons of Vivek. They also fleshed out a lot of the Daedric lords that had been minor powers in Arena and Daggerfall. Heck, there weren't even Daedra in Arena. They were just like demons or something. Vardenfell is just a fantastic setting. Of course, there's the fantasy racism, the dystopian vibes, no contest. Whatever drug Michael Kirkbride was on when they went deep into the Morrowind lore, I'll have what he's having. As far as the quest, the main quest is pretty peak. You're just a prisoner like any TES game. You may or may not be a reincarnation of Almsivi's dead BFF that they killed so they could become gods when he told them not to. They realize you're the only one who can stop Daggerfall, a crazy man in a loincloth with the most buttery smooth voice in a game with very little voice acting. There's a reason this is a meme.
I'm a god. How can you kill a god? Shame on you, sweet Nerevar.
I do have to at least mention the other games here. Shout out to Arena for introducing us to the setting, but there were a lot of rough edges still. Daggerfall's got the simulation down, and political intrigue, it definitely is at least as good as Morrowind, but it falls short in the main villain. But it did introduce the idea of dragon breaks, and a lot of the lore comes from this game. Oblivion has some of the quirkiest stories.
I'm getting out of here before it's too late. They'll be here any minute, I'm telling you! Run while you can!
Oblivion has great story questlines. In fact, the Thieves Guild questline is one of my favorite questlines of all time, even though it has some inconsistencies. I'll get into it more in the questline section, which I felt I needed to separate from this one. Skyrim, well, I definitely think it falls short in both narrative quality and lore to Morrowind and Oblivion. The main quest feels kind of rushed, and the lore definitely changed. There's a reason a lot of people think Skyrim, the province's lore, was better in Morrowind, which was lightly touched upon in Blood Moon, which takes place in Solstheim. Namely, the imperializing of Nord culture, changing the Dragonborn concept, and the changes to dragon lore. However, I do want to argue that most of the lore changes from TES 3 to 5 aren't retcons, but the result of 200 years passing in some cases, and an expansion of the lore in others. Like, I do like the expansion of dragon shouts, adding of specifics like Parthenax teaching Nord shouts at the behest of Kain, and not just Kain blasting shouts into their throats. And I theorize the imperializing of Nordic culture being an outcome of Talos, who Nords see as one of their own, and the passage of, once again, 200 years. Talos clearly was not worshipped in Daggerfall, since he's not an option, and there are no temples to him. But it's widely theorized the warp in the West was when it actually changed to him being a god, retroactively. So Talos worship didn't exist in TES 1 and 2 and was new in TES 3 and 4. A lot of people don't like this change, but the Nords still retain the old bones of their old Nordic ways in their story of Shore and, lots of little things. Much like the real world Christmas is like 3 pagan holidays in an overcoat. New religions very frequently come in and adopt a lot of the rituals of old religions. So this is pretty believable. A thing to remember about the Elder Scrolls series is anything you hear, anything you read about is possibly false. They lean very heavily into the unreliable narrator trope. In fact, I would go so far as to say anything the main character doesn't see for themselves could be false, or at least has a flawed perspective. That means it's very easy to recontextualize things, and very easy to add more explanation to things, such as the kind Parthenax thing. Anyway, I'm going to roll right into the next section, Questlines. Since they go hand in hand. So why did I do this? How does this differ from the last section? Especially when I lumped the whole adventure section together. Well, the last section judges the games as if they were books. This section looks at the questlines and discusses how fun they are to play. The original Legend of Zelda does not have a deep story, but it has excellent gameplay for the time. And of course, some of story of the individual questlines will bleed into this rating. Most of the Elder Scrolls games have a similar setup: main quests, guild quests, Daedric quests, Radiant quests, and unique questlines. The unique questlines are things like the Arena in Oblivion, the Civil War in Skyrim, the 3 houses in Morrowind, and the Knightly Orders in Daggerfall. Once again, not really rating Arena, but I do have to talk about it. The entire main questline is, hey, the next part of the Staff of Chaos is in this vague area. Go talk to an important person in that area. Do a dungeon. Find the thing in a place. Rinse, repeat. That's the whole game. The rest of the quests in the game are an extremely early version of Radiant quests. Very primitive, but a good way to start off a fantasy series for the early 90s. Daggerfall was a step above that, in that there were actually guild questlines, and Daedric quests, a main quest, as before, that is much better and rife with political intrigue, and also the early Radiant quests in taverns and inns. The guild questlines were very rudimentary, but each questline has a through line that is related to their subject. The Mages Guild has things like you find a book, finding an ingredient, catching an imp, kill an Atronach, get a scroll, banish a Daedra. Mage stuff. The Thieves Guild is all about you stealing priceless objects, which makes sense. The Fighters Guild is you fighting increasingly dangerous targets. The Assassins Guild... Why did I write Assassins Guild? The Dark Brotherhood is you assassinating people. See what I mean? Very apt. It's basically like the later entries in the series, but if there weren't an overarching storyline to each guild, surprise twists, or really NPCs that have any personality. You get exactly what you see on the tin. And some people really like this. I don't mind it, it's endless adventure. Moving on, Morrowind takes this a step further. It's got arguably one of the best and longest main quest lines. Jesus, hold on. Stupid cliff racer. Get out of here. Trying to make a video here. Fucking unplayable. As I was saying, good main quests, the Daedric quests, are short and varied. I forgot to mention that in Daggerfall, they're pretty much all, hey, go kill a guy and get the artifact. Morrowind actually varies what you do for each Daedra. Guild quests are the same style as quests for Daggerfall, but are a little bit more well written and there's more of them. As previously mentioned, the special quest is the 3 Morrowind houses, which are a little bit of intrigue and preclude you from joining any of the others, which I like. You lose the Knightly Orders from Daggerfall, but you gain the Imperial Cult and Tribunal Temple also, and trade the Dark Brotherhood for the Morag Tong. You get a Mage, Thieves, and Fighters Guild, and the Thieves and Fighters Guild also preclude you from joining each other, Without workarounds, which do exist and I did do on my playthrough, this exclusion actually feels like consequences for joining a guild, which might have clinched the win for the Morrowind here. But being real, most of the real competition for guild questlines is between Oblivion and Skyrim. Some people might disagree with this, but I think questlines resonate with me more if I care about the characters involved. There is a certain appeal to just being a guy, like in the questlines of Morrowind and Daggerfall guild quests. And actually these quests also exist in Skyrim and they're repeatable jobs. You know, like Dark Brotherhood Forever, and the Thieves Guild jobs where you just steal from a guy, etc. But I like the idea of a guild having a story. You come upon a group of people and their lives are in a certain state, and you collide with them, changing their lives for better or for worse, versus just being a jobber. Now I am going to say, probably the worst thing about the guild questlines for both Oblivion and Skyrim is, throughout the course of almost every guild, you become the guild master. That is a negative against them. It breaks verisimilitude that you would be the guild master of every single guild in the province. You should either be barred from being the guild master if you're the guild master of one thing, or have the option to just pass it to somebody else. Obviously, there are mods for this, I know, at least in Skyrim. You know, to make Brynjolf the Thieves Guild Master for one thing, or to make Tolfdir or Mirabelle the Archmage of the College of Winterhold. You know, the guy that's a million years old and actually knows magic, and the lady who deals with all of the actual day-to-day running of the College of Winterhold. It makes sense for them to be the Archmage. So do I need to do this questline by questline? Fuck it. Main quest, Morrowind. It goes through pains free to prove yourself as the Nerevarine, explore the Corporus, disappearance of the Dwemer, fight arguably the best villain in the series. It's the longest and best written, and you're not the clear hero, and who you're working for is not the clear good guys. It would have been better if you could join Daggerfall, that would be excellent. Since he's actually not the clear bad guy, at least not clearly worse than the Tribunal. But still, it's a great questline. I would say Oblivion is a close second because it has a decent villain, and you're just a guy, and Martin is the real hero, which I love. Also, it has some of the best moments, especially in the climax. The Oblivion Gates are very cool as a novelty at first, but they get really old really quickly. Daggerfall 3rd, since it has tons of political intrigue, and you actually have to pay attention to understand it, but arguably the most mundane villain. In Lord Woodburn, just regular guy. He's just a scheming noble. In Skyrim 4th, it's still decent, but it has a completely uninteresting villain, and it's really short. But like on the whole, I would rate the Elder Scrolls story and lore way higher against other games than I would rate their combat against other games. In fact, on my first playthrough of Skyrim, there was a bug where I couldn't absorb Dragon Souls, so I couldn't do the shout. It was fixed eventually, but I played 90% of the game before I finished the main quest, and I rolled up at level 70 and did the like 4 or 5 quests to kill Alduin, and I was like, that was it? But Daedric quests. Skyrim, by a country mile, since every single one of them is the best version in the series. Well, except Oblivion's Mephala quest is pretty even. They're both good. And the fact that the Nocturnal quest doesn't exist in Skyrim, really. And Boethiah's may be a little better in Oblivion. And I like Vermina's quest a little bit better in Oblivion. But once again, they're both good. I would say Sheogorath, Malakath, Sanguine, Meridia, Azura, Clavicus Vile, Hircine, Namira, and Mehrunes Dagon are all better in Skyrim. Mehrunes Dagon doesn't have a true quest in Oblivion, but there was a small DLC that lets you fight a bunch of guys and get Mehrunes Razor. Guild quests. This is where Oblivion makes its money. The Fighters Guild has the right amount of fighting, but also a story, a rivalry, and the only followers in the game. Skyrim's Fighters Guild, the Companions, got completely hijacked by werewolves, and while that questline is okay and has flavor, it is very fast, and I prefer Oblivion. The questline anyway. The companions themselves are very flavorful and interesting. With the Thieves Guild, Oblivion has arguably one of the best Thieves Guild questlines in any media, with the entire mythos of the Grey Fox leading up to the ultimate heist of an Elder Scroll. It was so good that it spawned a pretty good sequel in Skyrim modding, Grey Cowl of Nocturnal. Skyrim is good too, with the betrayal and the final fight, and Delvin's special side jobs, but it kind of co-ops Nocturnal into the Thieves Guild questline, which I'm not a fan of. Also, Brynjolf never has time for you. I feel like both Oblivion and Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood questlines are pretty equally good. The Mages Guild of Oblivion is more standard fare like the Fighters Guild, but it has a decent through line and features some version of Mana Marco, even though he supposedly became a god and has a moon, while the College of Winterhold in Skyrim feels incredibly short, makes you into a separate chosen one from being the Dragonborn, and you can do the entire questline without even being a mage, and only having the Fire Breath shout. It is probably the worst mage questline I've ever seen. As far as the one unique questline, the arena is simple, but fun in Oblivion, and the Civil War in Skyrim has high highs, but it's also quite repetitive and it has a lot cut from it. Like, you were supposed to be able to invade lots of other things, like have a huge mass battle in Riften, and there are mods that restore some of this, but the Civil War is so janky that it's extremely buggy. It's just very poorly written, both in the story and the code. I actually have a series of videos in which I play both sides of the Civil War with two separate characters, using some of the aforementioned mods. Check it out if you feel like. And then, worst of all, the Civil War just kinda ends. Ulfric/Elisif never take the throne, which is a huge letdown. It felt like they were readying for a DLC or something, and they were just like, no, Civil War is over. Go home, man. The funny thing is, a lot of quest mods assume that you never finish the Civil War, and they're all like, oh, the Civil War is still ongoing. There's lots of economic turmoil. Just because, I guess nobody ever actually finishes it. As for the DLC expansions, honestly, almost all of the DLCs in this series are the best quests in their given game. I would say Shivering Isles from Oblivion is probably the best DLC in this whole series. While Dragonborn from Skyrim is a close second and Dawnguard from Skyrim a close third, then Knights of the Nine from Oblivion, Tribunal and Blood Moon are alright from Morrowind, Hearthfires just adds adoptions from Skyrim, and TS 1 and 2 didn't have DLC. Battlespire kinda started as an expansion for Daggerfall, but it became its own game that everybody hated way more. And when I say DLC, I also mean expansions, because this game series has survived many generations of how we do gaming. Overall, I would say Oblivion has the most good quests, but Morrowind wins the main quest category. Oblivion is for its guild quests and DLCs, but Skyrim definitely gets an honorable mention for Daedric quests and also its DLCs. And I do need to shout out that Skyrim brings back the Radiant quests that Daggerfall and Arena had and actually gives them a name. Wow, I feel like we need an easy short category after that one. A palate cleanser. Crafting. So Skyrim's the only game that actually has real crafting. Thanks for watching. If you don't count alchemy, which Skyrim also has. But I think I'm going to chuck that into the magic section, which, spoilers, Skyrim is not going to win. So the older games had weapon and armor degradation, and you had to repair them. Skyrim does not. In getting rid of armor and weapon degradation that existed in Oblivion and Morrowind and Daggerfall, Skyrim added the ability to make items. Equipment degradation is annoying, and the only place I've ever seen it be annoying but still serve a purpose is Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So I have to give this one to Skyrim. Easy. If I had my pick, I would just have Skyrim crafting, plus the ability to cook. And if you really want equipment degradation in Skyrim, there are mods for that. Duh. This one is not as easy, seeing as how it's a big part of every The Elder Scrolls game, but we do have to consider a lot of things that might not be obvious, like shouts in Skyrim, spellmaking in every game but Skyrim, alchemy, which arguably reached its peak in Morrowind, enchanting items, which follows a similar power curve to spellmaking, and just how overpowered magic becomes because of spellmaking in Arena and Daggerfall. I would say it's a flat decline in the power level of magic from Arena all the way to Skyrim. In TES 1 through 4, you have the ability to make spells with the duration, damage, etc., determining how much it costs and what you can do based on your skills. And the same goes for enchanting equipment. But the amount of effects you can do decreases over the course of the series. Skyrim does not have spell making, but it does have enchanting, and it follows this pattern. This is the one place where I would say that Arena wins in flat spell power, if not just for the inclusion of the pass wall spell, which allows you to just disintegrate blocks of map and just bypass entire areas. It also includes a shield spell that has infinite duration, so you can cast a shield with all of your magicka, rest, and then just keep that shield. And it also has scaling based on your level, so your spells scale to infinity. So not only is Mage a viable playstyle in Arena, and to a lesser extent Daggerfall, it becomes the dominant playstyle at high levels. And it essentially trivializes a lot of the game later on. And Daggerfall's got similar scaling, not quite as broken. Also for enchanting in Skyrim, you get one effect per item. In the earlier games, you could add multiple effects on the same item. Alchemy kind of peaked with Morrowind because it had the most effects and it was really abusable. It's definitely the single most powerful skill in Morrowind, and it was kind of broken in Daggerfall. And by broken, I mean non-functional, not like super powerful. Did not exist in Arena. Should I ask myself, is this actually fun? Because it is kind of neat being able to break the game using Arena and Daggerfall's spell making and Morrowind's potion making, and the restoration loop in Skyrim. I was the guy that enjoyed doing Breath of the Wild shrines incorrectly, and I would say definitely the most robust magic creation system are in TS 1, 2, and maybe 3, because Morrowind added some effects. Alchemy is the best in Morrowind. Oblivion really doesn't have a lot going for it as far as magic is concerned. Like, it's definitely better than Skyrim in base magic, because I do want to mention, it's the only TS game where you can cast with a weapon in your hand. Why would they give you a power button in Skyrim that only works for shouts? The very few other powers are per day and require you to use your hands for magic. It was a neat idea to be able to single hand or double hand a spell for added power and added cost, but it kind of feels like a giant step backwards from arguably the only innovation in Oblivion. Skyrim shouts are really cool, but a lot of them in vanilla don't scale. Really good tools for an action game, but a lot of them get trivialized later. So I would say the first 3 games kind of tie in this category. I might even say Arena wins this. It's one of the few ways it's like Daggerfall, but slightly better instead of the opposite. Also, need to mention, though Arena and Daggerfall magic is very strong, they don't have a Skyrim Resto loop or Morrowind Alchemy loop or equivalent, so no dealing with infinite buffs. Though any playthrough of the game that is not using magic is basically challenge mode. Gameplay. I spent a whole video in my set of Skyrim modless videos trying to define what gameplay even is. I came away with how you move, how you play, how combat works, how social interaction works, really nearly anything. Of course, this does not include magic and combat, which I already covered. How about this? Which game has the most fun play experience that is not related to combat, exploration, or magic? Surprisingly, I do have at least something to say about this. As far as Daggerfall is concerned, I'm going to say the concept of steal mode, grab mode, info mode, and dialogue mode in Daggerfall is utterly baffling game design. It's even more baffling when you add mods to it that make hot swapping between modes no better, but add new combat interactions in different modes. Like the ability to kick your enemy is really cool, but I have to switch to a certain mode to do that. Or Parlay. I really like the language skills overhaul mod that lets you talk to enemies and possibly hire them over to your side, but you gotta switch to dialogue mode in the middle of combat. Half the time, even in vanilla, I'm fumbling trying to figure out what mode I need to be to do a thing, even in town. This game was made to be played with a keyboard and mouse and not on consoles. Why did that not let you do all the interactions all the time? What are you doing, Bethesda? Daggerfall, despite this failing though, does have several unique gameplay boons that were never seen again. Arena and Daggerfall both have climbing, and as vertical as Skyrim is, it could definitely benefit from climbing. There's an early mod in Skyrim that approximates Daggerfall climbing called Simply Climb, and there's a newer set of mods, Everglades Animated Traversal, Sky Climb, and Sky Parkour, that give you modern climbing. I feel like they really dropped the ball here because climbing makes the game a lot more interesting, and Daggerfall and Arena were both mostly flat and uninteresting compared to how vertical Skyrim is. I also do think Daggerfall had a really cool idea in language skills. Basically, when you show up and find a creature, a roll is made and you have a chance of a creature type being passive if your skill is high enough with that specific creature language skill type. I do feel like this is way too hands-off. The aforementioned language skills overhaul lets you talk to and possibly recruit them. Also, it's not really feasible as part of an actual character build because you only have so many points to go around and at least some of those have to be centered on combat. There's not a build in Daggerfall that allows you to circumvent all combat. The game systems just don't exist. If the game were something like Baldur's Gate 3, you'd be close. I think if Daggerfall had language skills under an umbrella completely divorced from the leveling system, but leveled up similarly with use, it would have been a hit and might have made it into later games. What I mean by this is you level them up with use, but it doesn't increase your character level, so you don't end up being a level 100 who can't kill a level 1 rat. Or alternatively, if all language skills were rolled into one language umbrella, and it took a ton of points collectively from all the different languages to level your character up at all. How about thieving? That's very gameplay-ish. Lockpicking. This is one place I think that the character skill versus player skill might actually benefit from being on the character end of the spectrum. After all, I personally only tangentially know how to pick a very simple lock, and most people have no idea. I've only ever succeeded at it once or twice. Part of the fun of role-playing a rocket scientist is not having to do actual rocket science. Lockpicking in Daggerfall is a flat check. You get one shot, and you can't try it again. That's really bad. Arena is kind of the same, but you can repeat your tries. It's kind of like Morrowind. Lockpicking in Morrowind is much like combat. You actually equip the lockpick as your weapon. You click on the thing, and he stabs the chest. And he stabs it, and he stabs it, and he stabs it, and eventually you are able to actually open the chest. This is also kind of bad. Beyond this, the game's converted to minigames, primarily navigated by the player. The minigames get easier or more possible as the character skill gets higher. Some people would argue Oblivion is the pinnacle of lockpicking, with a semi-realistic side view of tumblers that you have to push upward and lock in place. I do want to randomly mention that ESO and a Skyrim mod for Skyblivion gives you a 3D version of Oblivion lockpicking. Obviously, a lot of people like Oblivion lockpicking. I do think it is the best in the realism/player skill direction, although real locksmith's tools are much more complex with hooks, tension wrenches, rakes, and various other pieces, and real locksmiths don't actually break 50 lockpicks every time somebody hires them to break into their car after they accidentally lock themselves out. I personally think Skyrim, with the outside view of the lock and you just rotate and angle your tools, is the right mix of player skill and character skill. It's not obtrusive, and you can get through it quickly. But I do have to acknowledge that Oblivion lockpicking is probably the best designed in the series. So in this little subcategory, I would give it to Oblivion. Pickpocketing is largely the same in the whole series. It's basically just sneaking up on somebody and opening their pockets like a container and moving the stuff from their pockets into your own pockets. How about dialogue? From the top, Skyrim's dialogue system is like in the right ballpark, but they would need way more options for way more outcomes. I'm thinking Baldur's Gate 3 level of outcomes and options. And also if you included speech checks. Instead of just generic heroic option 1, generic heroic option 2, and hold on, I gotta go to the bathroom before I do this quest. Oblivion had a similar dialogue system, but they also had a persuasion system that relied on wheels. This was an interesting prospect. They tried something new. In practice, it's totally nonsensical. Some people hate it. Wait, some people like it. It honestly was hard for me to say that people like it, as I do not understand how it is possible to like this. Here's a cutaway to demonstrate how stupid this is. Keep in mind this is fairly accurate.
While I'm here, I'd also like to discuss buying a house in Cheydinhall. It's a matter of trust, and I don't trust you yet. I just saved your son from the very jaws of oblivion. Is that not enough? No. Maybe I could have a minute of your time to change your mind. For you? Of course. Hey, why are Nords always drinking? Why? 'Cause they married a Nord. Not bad. Not bad at all. May I also say, Cheydinhall's become a wonderful city under your leadership. Don't talk such rot. Okay, that was just a compliment. Relax? Oh, if you sell me the house, then anytime an Oblivion gate opens up nearby, I will be here to help. I accept. I have no choice. Great, so I get the house? It's a matter of trust. And I don't trust you yet.
This is not an exaggeration. As far as the dialogue system itself goes, I would say the voice acting of TES 4 and 5 really held back what you could talk to NPCs about. From what I know of Arena, it was largely like canned text that you selected responses to. In Daggerfall, you could pick from a list of topics. In Morrowind, you could also click on words the NPCs said. And actually, Morrowind had a rudimentary version of Oblivion's ridiculous persuasion wheels, which I much prefer and completely forgot about until just this moment. And it allowed you to talk to NPCs about a wide range of things, all in gigantic walls of text. I don't know if it would be really weird, but if I had an amalgamation of all the TES games, I would have the quest NPCs and the canned responses, hey, I need you to go do this main quest related thing. That could be voice acted, and then you could have Morrowind style just talk to them about anything and they would respond in text blocks. And I do like that concept of Oblivion's open-ended persuasion system, and I don't know what I would do with it, but do it better. Morrowind's version might be a bit too bare bones and feels really gamey, if you know what I mean. Maybe even have the text blocks for that. Because as you saw in that completely accurate video clip, a lot of the things they say just are insane. It really kind of meshes well with the uncanny feel of Oblivion in general, though. And last in this category, I think I want to talk about the vampire and werewolf gameplay where applicable. The fact that there is a questline for vampirism in Daggerfall feels pretty revolutionary for the time, when it's not even at all related to the main story. Daggerfall just adds a series of quests you can do as a vampire, and so does Morrowind. The Oblivion vampire experience really is non-existent. Now for all of these, I would say it's not really a gameplay thing, it's just buffs and debuffs to you. Skyrim, the Dawnguard expansion, actually adds a new form for vampirism, and same thing for lycanthropy, as far as it significantly affecting gameplay anyway. I mean, they're both not really balanced very well. They're both pretty powerful when you get them, and late game they're pretty much not useful at all. But it is interesting having another skill tree for two modes of gameplay. Way earlier in the video I mentioned how I don't like that the werewolf form takes over the Warriors Guild. None of the other games really have werewolf-related quests besides Skyrim, and not really any differences in gameplay. It's basically like being a super beefy hand-to-hand guy. Also, I'm contractually obligated to mention you can marry and adopt kids in Skyrim, although not have them, mind you. And that counts for something in gameplay. So, all in all, this section, how am I going to make sense of it? I would say that gameplay for the TES games is a really mixed bag. On its base, every The Elder Scrolls game has the same bones, but they throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Some stuff gets included in the next game. Some stuff, like climbing, is never seen again. Some stuff stays around for a very long time in various ways. So it's really hard to grade all of this. I would say the overall experience is probably better in Skyrim, but if you were to add a bunch of the stuff back from previous games with mods, like spell making for example, and climbing, it has the werewolf and vampire gameplay that is the best. Either stay with Skyrim lockpicking or add Oblivion lockpicking. There is actually no way to improve speech or add the linguistic skills to any of the other TES games, so I guess that's going to have to forever be in Daggerfall, its own special little snowflake. I come away from this section saying you should just play all of these games. Experience the gameplay of each game in and of itself. And there's no reason I would ever want to have that persuasion system exist in any other medium than Oblivion. Okay, another palate cleanser. This one's really easy. Because of Skyrim's perk system, its lack of skills, the way they've dumbed down everything. The way I said that sounds a lot worse than it is. A lot of the time it was just streamlining. There's no more extremely complicated character creation. You can come back from any of the bad things that you do in making your character. The fact that it doesn't have a dungeon like Privateer's Hold or the Imperial dungeons from Arena, that is just a meat grinder that makes people bounce off the game. I mean, arguably, past the character creation, Morrowind has the easiest start because it doesn't have a dungeon. But Helgen from Skyrim and the Imperial Dungeon from Oblivion are pretty easy compared to the first two games. And the fact in Skyrim that it's a little harder to break the game, but it's still possible, and that it's not somewhat required to cheese the game like in Daggerfall and Arena. The fact that it's voice acted, that it has tutorials, but they're not super obtrusive like in a lot of modern games. The user friendliness category definitely is won by Skyrim. This one is also kind of easy to me. I do at least have a couple of things to talk about. 1. Arena and Daggerfall cities are massive and all look the same. Not just from city to city. Orsinium cities look like High Rock cities look like Hammerfell cities. Within the same city, it's impossible to tell a lot of buildings from other buildings. Seriously, it's like they had a factory somewhere cranking out these buildings. 2. Skyrim cities are far too small and extremely crunched down for the sake of performance. But Oblivion and Morrowind cities fall into the just right size. Okay, between the last two, this is actually kind of difficult because Morrowind cities are varied and large enough. Some of them are quite vertical. They're pretty expansive. I actually got lost in Vivek City a bunch of times. And a lot of Oblivion's general construction tends to look pretty much the same. But the Imperial City is really beautiful. I'm going to say, in my opinion, Morrowind and Oblivion tie for different reasons. Here's another one. Right off the bat, I want to say that all 5 of the mainline games have their own strengths. The level at which they execute that, though, TES 3, 4, and 5 are definitely coming out ahead. I do like the atmosphere of the dungeons of Daggerfall, even though they're all kind of the same. Same for Arena, even though they're not all kind of the same. But Morrowind's got the vast alien landscape with all sorts of different biomes. It's just got this creepy feel to it. Skyrim's a large, vertical, gray and cold land with hard people. There's war and there's strife. And it's got a bunch of biomes of its own. Oblivion's the cosmopolitan center of an empire that's got the bright cities and the quirky characters. The dungeon atmosphere for the caves are all kind of the same in this one, but the Alliated Ruins are pretty much second to none. Skyrim Nord Ruins and Torma Ruins are also very interesting, so I'm going to take a pass on this. They all have their own strengths. And side note, I would say the same thing for the music, which you could classify as part of atmosphere. One thing I can say right out of the gate for this one, it is not Daggerfall. This is also one of the few areas where it was a step down from Arena to Daggerfall because Arena had several different tile sets. Daggerfall's dungeons all look like they were made by the same guy. Like in-universe, all hewn by the same person. They were also procedurally generated and, looked over afterwards, but there are still a lot of problems. It had arguably the best 3D map, but the only thing that did was to show you how screwed you were when the thing you were trying to find was behind a wall, an impassable door, a creature that you have no hope of killing, and the dungeon ecology makes absolutely no sense. I would say that Morrowind's dungeons are not very memorable, so it definitely doesn't win this, but they're better than Daggerfall. Oblivion I mentioned in the atmosphere section. The Alliated Ruins are designed and look really nice, and playing through them is fun. If you count the Oblivion Gates as dungeons, though, they're very samey and they're very repetitive. Skyrim has a lot of dungeons, and there are several different types of dungeons. Most of them are short, some of them are long. They definitely have stories that are completely contained within the dungeons. They all have loopbacks, which, say what you want about realism, I don't want to trot all the way back through a dungeon when you're done. Personally, I've explained this in my game with, they were emergency exits. Some of the dungeons have barred doors that you could just leave from the end of the dungeon. What if somebody got locked in there and they needed to escape? What if there was a fire? And then some of the dungeons have places where you can just jump down. This is actually how I explain how Delphine got to the end of Ustengrav in Main Quest 105. It's like 2 wrongs make a right, Somehow, with nothing disturbed, none of the Draugr dead, she found a way to get to the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller at the end of the dungeon, and leave a note there for you whilst taking it. I just surmised that she climbed up the loopback, which anybody with half a brain could do without the constraints of being a main character in a video game that can't walk over waist-high debris. So I want to give dungeon and level design to Skyrim. Whilst some of Oblivion is Second place. Overall ranking. I guess I should at least put my picks up here in review. Combat, Skyrim is the best, though mediocre. Small scale adventure, Skyrim again. Large scale, Daggerfall. Stats, Skyrim and approachability, Daggerfall and complexity. Story and lore, Morrowind, though I do go on an apologist rant about Skyrim's lore. Questlines, Oblivion in the various questlines, but Morrowind in its main quest. Crafting, Skyrim by default because I counted alchemy as magic. Magic, Morrowind 1 for alchemy, Daggerfall and Arena for most powerful and useful. Gameplay, they all have their own quirks. Obviously, user-friendliness is Skyrim. City design, Morrowind overall for various cities. Oblivion for the best city. Atmosphere, again, they all have their own strengths. Finally, dungeon and level design. Skyrim's my favorite. Oblivion is a close second. Is there really a way to say what is the best The Elder Scrolls game? It's a debate that's gone on since there were at least 2 games in the Elder Scrolls series. I can confidently say each game has its strengths and weaknesses. For Daggerfall, you play it for the political intrigue, the character building, the weird design of the language skills and climbing, the old schoolness of it, the essentially endless adventure of role-playing that you can make. For Morrowind, you play it for the atmosphere, the depth of the world, the story. It has probably the most depth. I would mod the combat a little bit. Oblivion has some of the best quest lines. Play it for the zany characters, for the Shivering Isles, the great clash of good versus evil, and of being a wingman to the actual hero, Martin Septim. And play Skyrim as a power fantasy, wherein the cities are small, but there is a huge amount to explore and experience. Immerse yourself in the world. It's got definitely the best combat, although they all kind of need some work. It does have the most mods. The main story and the side stories are a little weak, but it does have a lot of good high points. And along with having the most mods, it's got the most quest mods, including some of the best written stories that I've ever seen in a video game, like Vigilant, Glenmoral, Dakota, Siren Root, Legacy of the Dragonborn, Enderall, Beyond Reach, Forgotten City, which won an award and was made into its own game. You may have noticed I have a lot of characters, but a certain female Dunmer appears in 4 of the different games, and in the thumbnail. I asked myself what the Nerevarine would have been doing during the events of Daggerfall and Oblivion, since the first 4 of the Elder Scrolls games happened within a span of like 40 years. There is no real point to that. Watch my story series. So anyway, I know that I've been talking about this for a long time, over an hour, but leave your thoughts in the comments. I know I didn't cover everything out of every game, but it's been 20 years worth of games that I talked about. And I got into some deep facts about a lot of them. I know that the Arena crowd is probably not going to be satisfied with this video, because I really didn't talk about Arena, didn't do it justice actually. And the crowds from all the other games, while I'm sure that they have their thoughts about Morrowind did everything better than every other game, or Oblivion did everything better than every other game. Well, here's hoping that Bethesda learned something from all the games they've made in the past, and they pass that on to TES6 and don't just make Starfield but in Hammerfell. Anyway, so long, and thanks for watching.